Welcome, and this tutorial is going to be on servos, and specifically regular servos and continuous servos. So it's easy to see how it is when we actually program it, so let's get right into that. Once again, this is a more compressed version of this file, which is located in your templates, and all code will be on GitHub. So, looking at this, we want to make hardware objects, or hardware variables for each hardware. So to test it out, I'm going to make two servos. I'm going to start, yes, two servos. So it's just called a servo, and I'm going to call it servo1, and then servo 2. So let's start with servo1. Now, the way I'm going to declare it is like this, where I put my hardware map. This is how I usually get my hardware maps. There's other ways to do it that are shown in the template, but it's really your choice. So I'm gonna just be consistent, and in my config file on the robot, I'll call it also servo1, and then I will do the same thing for the second servo. Now, how do we actually use servos? So starting with a regular servo, there are there's a max, a min, and a middle, I guess. So with servo, there's 3 positions you want to worry about. When you use this command, set position, it gives you a double value. So what happens if you hit 0? Well, this will put it at one of the maximum points on the servo. Since it's a regular servo can go from 180 degrees back and forth from its initial to and then back again. So 0 is one of those ends, depending on how you have your servo started. 1, is another one of those ends, either depending on how you have it turned or whatever. When you initialize it, it'll go to one of those ends, and it'll be constant with that. Now, 0.5, that's the middle. But you can also go in between with 6 and everything. And just to note, when you set up position on a servo, it's going to stay there and not want to move until you turn off your robot or do something like that. So that's relatively how regular servos work. And you can just set a value like that, and it will go in that 180 degree span. Now, the next one is continuous servos, and continuous servos are a little bit different. So now, if you have checked the documentation or checked anything on servos, you would have seen that there is actually a continuous rotation servo class. However, you actually don't even really need that. The way you set up your servo here can work completely fine if you're just setting it as a servo. And I'll show you how that works and how most people have used this. So in a continuous servo, these values are a little bit different now. Since it can go on forever, it's more like a motor than it is a servo anymore. So, however though, it does not go negative. So there's 0, 0.5, and 1. Those are the values you have to worry about. So from 0.5 to 1, it will go turning in a certain direction at a speed. In the opposite direction, between 0.5 and 0, it will go also in the other direction in a certain speed, depending on where you place it in that range. 0.5 is now the stopping position, and that's kind of the short story. Sometimes it can be either 0.45 or 0.55. This really depends on your servo, so you have to test that. But for a lot of servo, it's just 0.5. So let's say we want it to go forward. We just hit 1, and it would move the servo forward until 0.5 is set as the position. Now, one thing you want to know is when you're setting a servo position, you usually want to put a thread sleep after it. So your program or your autonomous or whatever you're doing has time for that servo to reach its position. Not as so much in Telyop because you're not waiting on other things, but definitely in an autonomous program, you want to have a sleep variable right there. So same with this, we could have this thread sleep for 200 for 1 second, that's 1000 milliseconds, and then have it set the position back to 0.5 to stop it. Now, that's the gist of that. Now, I'm going to show you a little trick with servos. This is especially useful, actually, in teleop. So, the problem is, with your gamepad, they control it. The way you get gamepad values is a little weird. You get it from -1 to 1 on your sticks on your gamepad. So the problem with that is that you don't need -1. -1 is not a valid value for you setting your position. So we can actually put in a linear function to go and basically edit this. So I'm going to just show you the values that we want to change, and then I'll show you the graph of how I did it. So let's say we have f of x. We have f of x right here, and we start out, what we put in our x value is, let's say it's going to be from the gamepad. We put in -1, and what we want actually is we want 0, because -1, kind of like a regular motor, when you're setting it by itself, will make it go down. So I want to make this similar to how a motor runs. Now we want 0 to be 0.5 or whatever it'll be a little bit different if your servo starts at like 4.5 or stops at 0.55, and then we want 1 just to stay as 1. So, and then in between to do what it's supposed to. So you could put a bunch of if statements, and that'd get complicated. However, when you graph this, as shown in the screen, it actually comes out relatively nicely in a linear function. So I'm going to actually show you that linear function. So I'm going to make a new variable called servo2 plus our short for position, and I'm going to set equal to the gamepad 1.get left stick y. So this is the left stick and then the y direction. So now we're getting this random value right here that does its own thing, and it's giving us -1, 0, and 1, but we don't want to set the position to that yet, not until we've edited it so it works. So we're going to set servo2 position equal to this function, servo2 position times 0.5 plus 0.5, or in a basic sense, y equals x.5 plus 0.5. That's what that's showing right there. So with this, now one thing you have to note is that that's a float variable that is getting from the game stack, and we need to convert this into a float. So the easiest way is just add an f to all of these doubles right here, and now they are floats. So now, one thing you want to do, just in case, sometimes gamepads can give weird values, and one thing you always want to be in the process of doing is actually using this range.clip function. So range.clip servo.to position 0 to 1. So if sometimes gamepads can give you values over what they're supposed to, and so you don't break something by putting a value it can't handle, always put this range clip before you actually use the variable if you're getting gamepad input. And for a motor it'd be -1 to 1, but since we only want 0 to 1 values, we're going to put in that. And now you put in servo2 position, and it will control just like how you've controlled other teleops before on other motors, just when you put in that. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next tutorial.